Until now, she moved in silence, planning, preparing, hiding in plain sight. But this is where it begins. The story I've been building toward, the chapters I've waited to tell, when masks falter, when emotions bleed through the cracks, when secrets press too close to the surface and begin to speak. Chapter 23 isn't just the next part. This is the turning point. Welcome to the real beginning, that of the silent bond. Welcome to Riow Stories. If you've made it this far, thank you. This is where it all starts to pay off. These are some of my favorite chapters, and I can't wait to share them with you. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're ready. Let's dive into Chapter 23 of The Silent Bond, reincarnated as Sakura Haruno. Chapter 23, Shadows and Doubts. Sakura's Diary, Day 2126, Year 7. Sasuke smiled today. Not a smirk, not a guarded expression, but something real. It startled me. Not because I didn't believe he could be happy, but because I'd almost forgotten what he looked like when he was. And Itachi was with him, the two of them laughing over something small, sitting at a table like any other brothers might. No shadows, no silence between them. But I know this moment can't last. The future is still coming, and I'm still trying to outrun it. The first day of the academy had faded into memory, replaced by a steady rhythm of sparring, lectures, and whispered conversations in quiet corners. Our little group, Naruto, Hinata, Sasuke, and me, had grown tighter, almost unshakable. But even surrounded by them, the pressure inside me kept building. Some days it felt like I was holding my breath, like something was creeping toward us with every step forward we took. I needed a break from the tension. So when Naruto suggested ramen after class, I jumped at the chance. We planned to meet at Ichiraku's, a familiar, comforting spot, tucked between busy streets and warm smells. As I walked through the village on my way there, I reached out with my chakra almost unconsciously, letting my senses brush against the background hum of life. I shouldn't have done it, but I did, and something felt off. It wasn't danger. Not exactly. Just a low pulse of unease, like the village itself was whispering warnings I couldn't yet understand. By the time I spotted Sasuke walking ahead of me, my nerves were taut. But when I saw him smile, really smile, those worries briefly melted away. He didn't see me watching. Itachi was with him, trailing just behind, casual but alert. I recognized that chakra anywhere, composed, steady, powerful. But Sasuke's was different today, lighter, less burdened. I couldn't help but slow my steps and take in the sight. Something in my chest fluttered unexpectedly. Could I protect that smile? Could I stop the pain before it reached him? I didn't have an answer, but I wanted one. Sakura-chan! Over here! Naruto's voice rang out through the street, pulling me from my thoughts. He and Hinata were already seated at the ramen stand when I arrived. Naruto, naturally, had a giant bowl in front of him and was already halfway through it. Hinata held her tea with both hands, her cheeks pink as she glanced between the menu and Naruto's animated chatter. I slid into the seat beside them, smiling despite the weight in my chest. A few stalls down, Sasuke and Itachi had taken a seat. Sasuke said something I couldn't hear, and Itachi chuckled softly in response. The warmth between them was rare, but today it was visible, real. Naruto noticed them too. Oh, Sasuke's here! That's perfect! Without hesitation, he hopped off his stool and jogged over. Hey, Sasuke! Itachi! Come join us! Itachi looked over first, calm as always, then gave Sasuke a small nod. Sasuke hesitated, then followed. He didn't say anything when he slid into the seat across from me, just nodded slightly, meeting my gaze for a split second before looking away. But I caught the faint blush on his cheeks. Hey, Sasuke, I said lightly. Hey, he mumbled. Itachi took the seat beside him, posture relaxed, but his eyes never stopped observing. Naruto had already started peppering him with questions, from missions to training methods. Itachi answered a few, dodged a few more, and managed it all with the same unreadable composure. Hinata sat quietly next to Naruto, content to listen. Though I could see how carefully she watched every shift in his face. I knew that feeling well. But my attention drifted back to Sasuke. His chakra was so steady today, like fire banked just under the surface. When he was embarrassed, it flickered. When he got excited about training, it pulsed brighter. I was attuned to him in a way I hadn't been with anyone else. Maybe it was my sensory ability. Maybe it was something else. Naruto grinned, slurping his ramen. Hey, Sasuke, you ready for team placements at the academy? Sasuke gave a half shrug. Yeah, I'm ready. Naruto looked over at me, eyes shining. I bet we all end up on the same team. Me, you, Sakura-chan, and Hinata. That'd be awesome. Sasuke flicked a glance my way again, just for a second, then looked down at his bowl. Maybe, he said quietly, but the ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Hinata's voice was soft. I think it would be nice if we were. It would be more than nice. It would change everything. As the sky outside deepened into orange and gold, I looked around at the people gathered around me. Naruto's laughter, Hinata's kindness, Sasuke's rare smile, and Itachi's steady presence. A quiet moment, but also a fragile one. And deep in my chest, I promised again, I would protect this. Sakura's Diary, Day 21127, Year 7. Team placements are coming. I should be excited, but all I can think about is the space between now and what's coming next. I keep watching Sasuke, not because I'm chasing something childish, but because I'm afraid. Afraid I'll miss the moment it all changes. Afraid I won't be able to stop it. But maybe I'm not just watching anymore. Maybe I'm trying to hold on. After we left the ramen stand, the four of us walked together under the deepening sky, our voices low and tired in that pleasant post-meal kind of way. Itachi didn't walk with us. He had bowed out with a polite nod, offering a rare smile to Naruto and a brief, unreadable glance in my direction. He always seemed to be measuring things I couldn't see. As we passed by the training grounds, Naruto suddenly bounded ahead and spun on his heels. Let's go another round tomorrow after class, he shouted, striking a dramatic pose. I need to test my latest technique. Sasuke sighed. If it's anything like your last one, you're going to end up in a tree again. Hinata giggled quietly, her hand half covering her mouth. Naruto's grin didn't falter. Then I'll train even harder. I've got to keep up with all of you. He meant it. His words weren't a joke this time. I could feel it in his chakra, his willpower burning bright, chaotic but unwavering. It made me ache a little, because I knew how hard his path was going to get. As we reached the corner where we usually parted ways, Hinata glanced shyly toward Naruto. I could help you practice if you want. Naruto blinked. Really? You do that? Hinata nodded, her blush deepening but her smile steady. Then it's a deal, Naruto declared, pumping his fist in the air before darting down the street. See you guys tomorrow. Hinata followed after him with soft steps, turning back to wave goodbye. That left me and Sasuke walking together, our footsteps slow, quiet. He didn't speak. Neither did I. But I could feel him thinking, not just idly reflecting, really thinking. His chakra wasn't tense, but it wasn't fully at ease either. There was something coiled beneath it, like he was sorting through something heavy. I glanced at him. Everything okay? He nodded, but didn't look at me. Just thinking. I didn't press. Instead, I walked beside him in silence, our shadows stretching long behind us. Then, after a moment, he asked, Do you ever wonder what it's all for? I blinked. What's for? All of it. Training, classes, missions, this whole shinobi thing. It wasn't like Sasuke to get philosophical, not out loud, but something about the way he said it struck me. There wasn't anger in his voice, or even resentment, just quiet doubt. I hesitated. I think it's for the people we care about, so we can protect them. He didn't respond at first. Then he said, almost too softly to hear, Then what happens when we can't? I stopped walking. Sasuke didn't look at me, but I saw his jaw tighten. You're thinking about your brother, I said gently. He didn't answer, but he didn't have to, because I was thinking about Itachi too, and what was coming, and how much it was going to break him. When we reached the road leading to the Uchiha compound, Sasuke paused at the gate. You don't have to walk me home. I know, I said, meeting his gaze, but I wanted to. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. Thanks. I turned to leave, but just before I did, I said, Sasuke, you don't have to figure it all out right now. You don't have to carry it alone. He didn't speak, but when I looked back one last time, he was still standing there, watching me go. His chakra, flickering quietly behind me, felt steadier than it had all evening. Sakura's Diary, Day 228, Year 7. There are too many things I can't say out loud. I want to trust them with everything, but the more I learn, the more dangerous that feels. Itachi said to protect Sasuke, but sometimes I wonder, who's really in danger? Sasuke or all of us? The next day at the academy passed slowly. Too slowly. Iruka-sensei's voice blurred into the background as I sat in my usual spot beside Hinata, pretending to take notes while my mind raced through seal patterns and Anbu dossiers I wasn't supposed to have read. Across the room, Sasuke was focused, of course, always composed, always in control, but I could see the slight crease in his brow, the flicker of something else behind his eyes. His conversation with me last night lingered in my mind, the doubt, the hesitation. Naruto, on the other hand, was doodling spirals in the margins of his worksheet. Every now and then, he'd glance over at me or Hinata and grin, like he was holding back something ridiculous just for the fun of watching us squirm. And Hinata? She was pretending to be focused too, but her eyes wandered, always toward Naruto, always quiet. I was surrounded by them, these three people who meant more to me than they'd ever know, and I couldn't tell them the truth, because part of me wasn't even sure what the truth was anymore. After class, I stayed behind under the pretense of organizing my scrolls. When the others left, I slipped out the side door and took a longer path home, detouring past the outer edge of the Uchiha district. I didn't mean to stop, but my feet did. There, leaning against the stone wall of a back alley garden, stood Itachi. He didn't acknowledge me right away, just stared out toward the rooftops, his eyes narrowed against the breeze. I approached slowly. "You knew I was here," I said softly. "I usually do," he replied, still not looking at me. We stood there in silence for a moment, the distance between us taut with unspoken questions. "I've been thinking about what you said," I admitted. "Good." He finally turned to face me, his expression unreadable as always. "You're aware of the pressure inside the clan?" "Yes, but that's not new." "No, it isn't." He studied me quietly for a moment, and I felt like he was peering through me, dissecting every thought I hadn't voiced. Finally, he asked, "Do you trust the village?" It was a simple question, but it hit me like a blade to the ribs. I opened my mouth, then hesitated. "I want to," I said, "but there are too many secrets, too many things that don't make sense." "Good," he said again. "Don't trust anything blindly." I blinked at that. "Even you?" His mouth twitched. "Especially me." I didn't know what answer I was expecting, but it wasn't that. "You're not what they say you are," I whispered. He tilted his head slightly. "And what do they say?" I hesitated. "That you're cold, ruthless, dangerous." He gave the smallest smile. "Some things are better believed." I shook my head. "Sasuke trusts you, and that's why I can't afford to fail." His voice, still calm, still level, carried a finality that made my skin crawl. Like he already knew how this story ended, and he was the only one trying to rewrite the last page. I wanted to ask more, but he turned before I could. "One day," he said, walking away, "you'll have to choose between protecting the truth or protecting the people you love." Then he vanished into the narrow passage between buildings, leaving only silence behind him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, an unfinished seal sprawled out across parchment, my brush hovering inches above the paper. My chakra felt sluggish, my mind restless. I kept hearing Itachi's words over and over in my head. Choose. But how could I, when the truth and the people I loved were tangled together like the same thread? Sakura's diary. Day 2129 years. Itachi was right. The more I look beneath the surface, the more I realize I don't know who's really holding the strings. I thought the danger was far away, that I could prepare for it in time, but it's already here, and it's not just Danzo or the Uchiha. It's me, because the more I care, the more I'm afraid of what I'll have to become. The morning after my conversation with Itachi, I found myself walking to the academy in silence, my satchel heavier than usual, even though I hadn't packed anything different. It wasn't the scrolls or notebooks that weighed on me. It was the choices I hadn't made yet. Naruto met me at the gates, as bright and loud as ever. "Sakura-chan, hurry up! We're going to be late." "You're never actually worried about being late," I muttered with a weak smile as I caught up. He grinned sheepishly. Okay, but I want the good seat today. You know, by the window." "You always want the window seat," I said. "Exactly, so I gotta beat Sasuke there." At the mention of Sasuke's name, my heart did something it had no right to do, flutter. I hated it, not because it was wrong, but because it made everything more complicated. Inside the classroom, Sasuke had beaten Naruto to the window seat, as always. He was already there, slouched with one arm resting against the windowsill, staring out like he had better places to be. When I entered with Naruto, our eyes met, just for a second. It was nothing, and it was everything. He looked away first. Later that day, during weapons training, I noticed something strange. Sasuke's usually impeccable shuriken aim was slightly off. Not by much, barely a finger width, but enough for me to see the tension in his jaw every time a target didn't land dead center. I was partnered with Hinata, who was doing her best to correct her kunai grip under Iruka-sensei's watchful eye. But my attention kept drifting. Something was bothering Sasuke. When the lesson ended, I slipped away from the others and followed him behind the equipment shed where he liked to cool off. He noticed me before I could say anything. "Stalking me now?" he said dryly. "Maybe," I said, folding my arms. "You weren't yourself today." He didn't respond at first, just leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Sasuke," I said softly, "I'm fine." "You missed the center ring 3 times," I pointed out. He turned to look at me, his face shadowed by the overhang. "You're keeping count now?" I shrugged. I noticed things. For a moment he said nothing. Then he asked, voice low, "Do you think I'm weak?" The question hit me like a slap. "What?" He looked away. "You're always improving. Naruto's got ridiculous stamina. Even Hinata's starting to gain confidence. And me, I've plateaued." "That's not true," I said immediately. "You're one of the strongest in our class." "But not the strongest," he muttered. "Not enough, not yet." There it was again. That voice I recognized, the same one from my old life, the one that would drive him toward a darkness he couldn't walk back from. I stepped closer, trying to keep my own voice steady. "You don't have to be the strongest, Sasuke." His eyes met mine again, and for the first time that day, they were clear. "You say that now," he said, "but when everything changes, you'll see. Strength is the only thing that matters." "No," I whispered. "We matter." He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away. We walked back together in silence, the air between us thick with everything we hadn't said. I didn't know how to stop what was coming, but I knew now, with frightening clarity, that the pull between us wasn't going away, and neither was the danger. Sakura's Diary, day 2130, year 7. They say knowing the future is a gift, but some days it feels like a curse. The better I understand this world, the more I realize how tightly the threads are knotted. Danzo, the Uchiha, the Academy, me, Sasuke, we're all tangled together, and if one thread pulls too hard, everything could unravel. That night, sleep came late. I lay in bed with my window cracked open, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, carrying the scent of rain and smoke from a distant training fire. The village always seemed quieter at night, but I knew better. I could feel it in my bones, in the way my chakra buzzed when I closed my eyes. We were being watched, not just by Danzo's men anymore, but by others, people I didn't recognize. Their signatures didn't feel hostile, exactly, just interested, analytical. Too many eyes, too many questions. The next morning at the academy, the usual hum of chatter filled the hallways, but something about the air felt different. Tense, like the teachers were on edge about something they wouldn't talk about. Iruka-sensei kept glancing out the window during lessons. Mizuki looked ready to bolt. Even Naruto seemed to sense it. "Something's going on, right?" he whispered during break, leaning close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath. "Yeah," I whispered back, "but I don't know what yet." Sasuke was unusually quiet that day. Even Hinta kept glancing at the windows like she expected something to crash through them at any second. By the time class ended, I had already decided I wasn't going home. Not yet. The sky was overcast as I walked the long path toward the outer market district, a part of the village I hadn't visited often. The buildings here were older, nestled between warehouses and tea houses, less polished, less watched, perfect for slipping between the cracks. I had heard whispers the week before, a rumor about someone who might know how to get off grid, someone who traded information for silence, someone who worked beneath the surface of the village. No one said the name aloud, but I had heard it. The Pleasure House. Not a place for children, definitely not a place for a kunoichi in training. And yet, that's where I was going. Not for pleasure, not for scandal, for answers. I didn't know what I'd find behind that door, only that I had to open it. Chapter 23.1, The Pleasure House Encounter. Kakashi hadn't walked these streets in years. The nightlife of Konoha shimmered like a dream, soft lanterns swaying on strings above winding roads, casting golden pools of light on polished stones. Music drifted from open doorways, mingling with the hum of conversation and bursts of laughter that echoed off psych shops and tea houses. It was alive, too alive. He moved through it like a shadow, his steps silent, his presence dulled by the low-level genjutsu woven into his features. It wasn't complicated, just enough to soften his jawline, darken his hair, make his eye shape forgettable. A civilian would pass him without pause. Even another shinobi would hesitate before placing him. But Kakashi still felt out of place. He wasn't a creature of noise and warmth. Not anymore. Missions had become his rhythm. Secrets, his language. Now, surrounded by joy and oblivious pleasure, he felt like a blade slid between laughter and light. Still, the Hokage's orders brought him here. A woman, Lady Yuki, they called her, had arrived from nowhere and made her presence known in the most unexpected of ways. A geisha, performing out of a place called Sweet Paradise, tucked along the edge of Konoha's red light quarter. It wasn't the venue that raised concern, nor the rumors of her beauty. It was her chakra. She was an Uzumaki, or so the whispers claimed. That alone was enough to warrant caution. Their clan was known for their potent chakra and affinity for sealing techniques. Genjutsu could be learned, but Fuinjutsu, that was blood-bound art. And if she posed any threat to Naruto, Konoha's Jinchuriki and the last confirmed heir of that clan, then Kakashi had to know. He stopped in front of the building. The sign was painted in delicate, flowing kanji, Sweet Paradise. Pink sakura petals had been painted along its border, some of them fading from weather and time. It was almost charming, but Kakashi's instincts warned him otherwise. He adjusted the collar of his robe, took a steadying breath, and stepped through the front door. The scent hit first: sake, roasted meats, and floral perfume. Heat rolled from nearby braziers, chased by music and laughter. Patrons crowded around low tables, their voices raised in celebration, in flirtation, and drunken ease. Lanterns flickered overhead in hues of gold and rose. It was indulgent, effortlessly designed to disarm. His gaze swept the room. No immediate threat, no chakra spikes. But subtle traces of genjutsu floated in the air like pollen, gentle nudges toward comfort, toward trust. A young waitress moved behind the bar, refilling drinks with an easy smile. Kakashi made his way toward her, pausing just close enough that only she could hear him. "I'm here for the Uzumaki performance." She blinked. Then something behind her eyes shifted. Not alarm, recognition, protocol. She smiled again, this time with a knowing air, and gestured to a side corridor with a slight bow. "Right this way." They ascended a narrow staircase to the second floor, the noise below fading behind them. The air here was cooler, dimmer, the energy more restrained. Here, the real guests were seated. Low tables surrounded by embroidered cushions filled the room. The clientele was shinobi, elite, discreet. He caught glimpses of clan symbols stitched into robes. A Nara, a Hyuga, possibly a Yamanaka tucked behind a screen. Their expressions were composed but not indifferent. They were here for something specific. "Please take a seat," the waitress murmured, leading him to a secluded table at the rear with an excellent view of the stage. "The performance will begin shortly." Kakashi sat, letting the illusion around him remain intact. He could feel the genjutsu here more precisely now. A clever layering of scent, sound, and warmth, designed not to deceive, but to soothe, to make you want to stay. And that alone made him more alert. The lights dimmed slightly as a hush spread across the room. The scent of sakura intensified, followed by the soft creak of wood as a figure stepped onto the stage. She was older, her kimono a riot of colors, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a precise bun. She held a long pipe in one hand and took a leisurely puff before letting the smoke curl above her head. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and commanding despite its gentleness, "welcome to our humble establishment. Tonight we offer you something truly rare, a gem among blossoms." She smiled, her eyes glinting. The one and only Lady Yuki. Smoke poured across the stage, thick and fragrant. Not just incense. Kakashi felt the chakra laced inside it. His Sharingan, still hidden behind a neutralizing contact, tingled. The genjutsu was beginning. But he didn't resist. He wanted to see it, feel it for what it was. The smoke parted like curtains, and there she stood, Lady Yuki. She emerged like a vision, no footsteps, no announcement, only presence. Lady Yuki stepped forward through the dissipating smoke, her silhouette delicate yet composed. The light from the lanterns caught the shimmer of her kimono, a subtle cascade of silvers and pale pinks embroidered with plum blossoms and winding rivers. Her hair, a rich scarlet hue, was coiled high with polished hairpins, a few elegant strands left free to frame her face. No white powder or crimson lips adorned her. No theatrical paint. She didn't need it. Her beauty was natural, haunting in its simplicity. A quiet confidence radiated from her every motion, the grace of someone who knew exactly how to control a room without ever needing to raise her voice. But Kakashi wasn't here to admire her. He focused on her chakra. There was something off, not in a threatening way, but in its weight. It was potent, controlled. It wrapped around her like a veil of silk, impossible to grasp directly, yet undeniably present. She seated herself on the stage before a koto, a traditional stringed instrument placed upon a silken mat. Her hands hovered for a moment, fingers poised above the strings. Then, with a slight breath, she began to play. The melody was slow, melancholic. Notes twined like drifting leaves, soft, elegant, but laced with sorrow. Each vibration seemed to stretch the air, pulling the room into her tempo. Genjutsu. Not overt, not aggressive, but it was there, carefully layered into each note. With every gentle pluck of the strings, a haze fell across the minds of the audience. The scent of Sakura thickened again. Light dimmed subtly, time slowed. One patron tilted his head, mouth slightly open. Another closed his eyes, swaying faintly to the rhythm. Even some of the shinobi Kakashi recognized looked disarmed, caught in the illusion of it. He allowed the genjutsu to brush against him, let it probe, test. It was artful, not intended to deceive or trap, but to cradle the audience in comfort, in emotion. A performance that went through the senses, not around them. He wondered briefly how many noticed it. Then his gaze sharpened. Her chakra flared, only slightly, as she shifted into a new melody. Her fingers moved with precise elegance, the tempo lifting briefly before dipping again into something more complex. Kakashi caught a weave of chakra nearly undetectable, spiraled into a feedback loop that drew attention gently but completely toward her eyes. That's not a civilian's technique. He masked his realization beneath the blank expression, his posture unchanged. This woman wasn't simply talented. She was trained. Uzumaki or not, no ordinary geisha knew how to hide chakra signatures like this, let alone embed them with such nuance into genjutsu-laced performance. Her eyes met his, just once, fleeting, a flicker. He felt it then, a pulse of chakra not meant for him specifically, but aware of him, as if she was testing him, too, so she knows someone's watching closely. Good. The song began to fade, trailing into silence. As the last note hung in the air like a suspended breath, the illusion ebbed. The jutsu dissipated with perfect timing, like the exhale after a prayer. For a moment, no one moved. Then applause broke out, slow, unsure, then warm and insistent. The entire room seemed to release its collective breath. Shinobi and civilians alike applauded with honest admiration, though some looked faintly dazed, as though unsure why they felt so affected. Kakashi remained still. Applause wasn't his purpose. His mind was already assembling a profile. Chakra control, genjutsu sophistication, public positioning. Too deliberate, too convenient. Then the madam returned to the stage, a theatrical smile curving her lips. As is tradition, she cooed, one fortunate guest will be chosen tonight to share a private audience with our treasured Lady Yuki. Kakashi's attention narrowed again. This had been part of the mission briefing. The Hokage had insisted he make contact. Discreetly. Personally. This would be his opportunity. Waitresses moved from table to table, offering lacquered boxes filled with slips of paper. Kakashi accepted his without word or gesture, opening it with a casual flick of his thumb. His number matched the one the madam called aloud. All eyes turned toward him, some curious, others envious. He stood, composed as ever, and followed the waiting attendant. The hush followed him as he left the room. The upper floor of Sweet Paradise was quieter, almost unnaturally so. Kakashi followed the attendant in silence, each step muffled by thick woven rugs and the ambient hush of perfumed air. The polished wooden walls curved in an elegant, older style, and faint melodies played somewhere far off, just audible enough to set a rhythm to one's breath. At the end of the corridor stood a sliding door painted with winding lotus vines. The waitress paused, knocked softly, and called in a practiced voice, "Your guest has arrived, Lady Yuki." A beat of silence, then calm and sure, a voice from within, You may enter. The door slid open. Kakashi stepped into a room bathed in soft amber light. Lanterns glowed low from the corners, illuminating smooth floors and a lacquered table set with sake and two small porcelain cups. The balcony door was open, and a night breeze stirred the silk curtains gently. Beyond it, the rooftops of Konoha stretched out in quiet shadow. Lady Yuki sat near the edge of the room, her long red hair now unpinned and trailing over one shoulder like a ribbon of fire. She didn't turn immediately, but he could tell. She knew exactly where he was from the moment he entered. Only when the door closed behind him did she finally face him. Her expression was serene, unreadable, but her eyes, those piercing emerald eyes, locked onto his with such intensity that even he felt the weight of it, as if she was trying to see through him. "Welcome," she said gently, inclining her head. "Please, sit." Kakashi said nothing at first, simply lowering himself across from her with measured ease. He let the illusion of calm settle between them like mist. His true appearance remained hidden beneath the genjutsu, but he knew better than to assume she couldn't sense more. She poured sake into both cups, her hands moving with a dancer's grace. Every gesture she made was quiet, intentional, designed to keep control of the space. She handed him a cup. "So," she began, her voice like still water, "what brings a man like you to a place like this?" Kakashi accepted the drink, but didn't sip. "I could ask you the same thing, Lady Yuki," he replied. "Not every day that a member of the Uzumaki clan appears in Konoha." There was the smallest pause. Her smile remained, but her eyes narrowed, just enough to reveal the thought spinning behind them. That name had struck something, even if she was quick to mask it. "Uzumaki?" she echoed, voice laced with polite amusement. "What makes you think that?" Kakashi leaned forward slightly, still casual, but his gaze sharpened. "Your hair," he said. "Red like blood. It's a strong indicator." Lady Yuki let out a soft chuckle and leaned back, lifting her own cup to her lips. She sipped, savoring the warmth before speaking again. "You shinobi are always so observant," she said. "But surely you know, red hair isn't exclusive to my clan." "No," he agreed, "but your chakra is." That stopped her, just for a heartbeat. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Kakashi saw it. A shift in posture, a flicker in her aura. The smile faded for the briefest second before returning, softer this time. "Everyone has their secrets," she murmured. "I'm just here to entertain, nothing more." Kakashi didn't answer, not yet. He took a sip of the sake, careful not to break eye contact. The silence that settled between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was layered, weighted. She was hiding something, but not in the clumsy way of a spy or criminal. No, Lady Yuki moved like someone who had lived with secrets for a long time, someone who had worn masks before. Finally, he set the cup down. "And what do you think of Konoha?" he asked. She tilted her head at the question, considering it for a moment. Then, "It's quieter than I expected," she said, "but not peaceful. There's too much watching, too much waiting. This village feels cautious." Kakashi's expression didn't change, but inwardly he noted it. She was observant, sharp, likely more experienced than her role suggested. He decided to test her. "Do you have plans to stay long?" he asked, as if making idle conversation. Another soft smile. "Does anyone truly know how long they'll be welcome?" Their eyes met again, longer this time. He didn't press further. He wouldn't get the truth by cornering her. Not tonight. But he had seen enough to confirm it. She was no ordinary geisha, and definitely no accident. Her chakra control, her genjutsu skill, her poise. This woman was hiding power behind silken layers. She wasn't here for fame or coin. She was here for a reason. And now, so was he. As the night air drifted in from the balcony and the village's lights blinked like fireflies in the distance, Kakashi sat with Lady Yuki in silence. Neither gave ground. Neither showed fear. But both knew this was only the beginning. The moon hung low over Konoha, painting the rooftops silver and casting long, quiet shadows through the narrow streets. Most of the festival lanterns had been extinguished, leaving only a few flickers of gold swaying gently in the warm summer air. It was late. The village was settling into sleep. But not him. Kakashi moved through the village like a phantom, the hem of his uniform brushing against the silent stone streets. His hands were tucked in his pockets, his face as unreadable as ever behind the mask. But his mind was far from quiet. Sweet paradise. The name alone would have made him scoff on any other night. Yet tonight, he had walked into that den of illusion and luxury, and what he found there had unnerved him more than anything he'd seen on the battlefield. The woman, Lady Yuki. She wasn't just talented. She was dangerous. That much was clear. Her chakra had a weight to it, one that lingered in his senses even now, long after he'd stepped back into the cool night air. She was playing a role, masking herself with elegance and grace, but her performance hadn't been merely entertainment. It had been a message. And what disturbed Kakashi the most was that he wasn't sure who it was meant for. He passed the closed doors of silent shops and shuttered tea houses, the scent of sake still faintly lingering in the air. His thoughts ran deeper than his surroundings. The music she had played on the koto, he could still hear it. It hadn't just triggered emotion. It had cracked something open inside him. For the briefest moment during her illusion, he had felt them again. Obito, Rin, Minato-sensei. The image had been so vivid he could almost taste the summer air of their youth, feel the sun on his skin as they trained in the field near the memorial stone. He had seen Rin smile again, unfiltered, untouched by blood or regret. It was wrong. Too perfect. And that's how he knew it had to be Genjutsu. Yet, his Sharingan, though concealed, had noticed the subtle chakra weave. It hadn't been aggressive or invasive. It had been gentle, personal, the kind of Genjutsu one didn't use unless they knew exactly what they were trying to evoke. And that was the part he couldn't explain. He hadn't spoken Rin's name aloud in years. Few alive even remembered her. Fewer still would dare to bring her up in conversation with him. So how had that woman known? His jaw tensed. She had done something more dangerous than cast a Genjutsu. She had stirred something in him. Kakashi's boots scraped lightly against the wooden steps of his apartment complex. He pushed the door open and slipped inside without turning on the lights. The space was quiet, exactly as he had left it. A half-drunk cup of tea on the table, a few reports scattered on the floor. He didn't bother tidying them. Instead, he walked to the window and slid it open, letting the crisp air wash over him. He stood there for several minutes, unmoving, gaze fixed on the village skyline. There was no record of an Uzumaki survivor arriving in Konoha, no record of a kunoichi matching her description. He'd already checked. He'd scoured the village registry before even accepting the mission. And yet here she was, powerful, poised, a ghost of a clan long thought destroyed. And worse, familiar, not in appearance, but in presence. Like someone reaching through the years and pressing a hand to a wound he thought had long since scarred over. The woman at Sweet Paradise was not what she seemed, and Kakashi intended to find out exactly who she really was. Kakashi didn't sleep. He sat in silence for hours, legs crossed at the center of his sparsely furnished living room, the glow of the moon casting shifting shadows across the floorboards. His eyes, though half-lidded, were sharp and calculating behind the mask. There were things about this woman, Lady Yuki, that didn't add up. Her mannerisms were polished, almost courtly, but Kakashi had noticed the little tells. She carried herself like someone trained in more than art and illusion. Her footsteps were soundless. Her awareness of her surroundings perfect, not civilian, not even ordinary shinobi. And then there was her chakra. Kakashi had sensed it beneath the layers of Genjutsu, a signature not of brute strength, but of refinement, controlled, measured, laced with emotion. The kind of chakra only someone deeply disciplined and deeply motivated could maintain so carefully. He leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled, his elbows resting on his knees. She wasn't just a performer. She was hiding something. He recalled the flicker in her eyes when he'd mentioned the Uzumaki name, the smile that didn't quite reach her gaze, the subtle tightening of her grip around the sake cup when he spoke of her chakra. For a woman who cloaked herself in elegance, she hadn't been prepared for scrutiny. And the moment she'd handed him the drink, he'd noticed the brief hesitation, not out of fear, out of calculation, as if offering the sake wasn't part of her script, but an improvised gesture to keep him grounded in the moment. Kakashi's fingers curled slightly. She was trying to steer the conversation. And yet, despite her efforts, she had revealed something unintended, vulnerability. That was what gnawed at him now. He couldn't shake the impression that she hadn't meant to draw him in emotionally, but she had. Not through seduction or illusion, but through recognition. Some part of her knew too much about him, too much about Rin. The image of Rin's face rose again, unbidden. Her soft expression, the way her hair had danced in the wind during training, the way her voice used to gently chastise him for being cold. He hadn't dreamed of her in years, and yet tonight, in that room, it had felt like she was there. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. Could it be someone from the past? Someone using a memory of Rin against him? Some root operative playing a cruel game? Danzo had pulled worse. Or was it something more personal? He couldn't shake the feeling that Lady Yuki's appearance wasn't random. She had arrived in the village without fanfare, embedded herself in a district frequented by shinobi, and built a reputation almost overnight. It was too precise, too coordinated. He stood and crossed to his desk, brushing aside mission files and unlocking a smaller drawer beneath. Inside were older reports, ones he rarely looked at anymore. Intelligence en route, on the Uchiha tensions, on remaining Uzumaki bloodlines. Dead ends, mostly. But tonight, he would begin again. He needed to know who she was and what she wanted. The knock came well past midnight. Kakashi didn't move at first. He had been expecting something, an intruder, a message, maybe another Anbu courier with a change in mission parameters. But this felt different. There was no warning presence, no careless chakra flaring behind the door. Whoever stood outside was skilled, controlled, silent. He rose without sound, fingers brushing his thigh holster as he crossed the room. The kunai was in his hand before he reached the door, hidden behind the fold of his sleeve. Then came the voice, soft, almost weightless against the wood. "I think we need to talk, Kakashi." The air around him shifted. He knew that voice. Not precisely, not logically, but viscerally. It pulled at something in his chest he hadn't touched in years. Cautiously, he cracked the door. A figure stood there cloaked in shadow, dressed in simple robes, a white mask concealing their face. Feminine, the shape of the shoulders, the curve of the jaw. Still, it was the presence Kakashi focused on, muted but unmistakably tuned to his. Someone had studied him long enough to match their cadence to his threshold. A chill swept through him. "I'll ask once," he said evenly. "Who are you?" No reply, only the slight tilt of the masked figure's head. Then slowly they stepped inside without waiting for permission. Kakashi didn't stop them. The room filled with stillness, charged and taut. The figure paused just past the threshold. Her hand rose, finger brushing the side of the mask, and then deliberately she pulled it free. Kakashi's world narrowed to a single point. Brown eyes, soft features, the same expression he had seen in his dreams, gentle, kind, forgiving. The word barely escaped his lips. He didn't move, couldn't move. Everything in his body screamed denial, and yet there she was, standing in front of him, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but flesh and blood. Her hair shimmered in the pale moonlight, her presence pressed against him like a distant warmth returning after years of winter. "I'm here," she said softly, her voice laced with sorrow. Kakashi's knees nearly gave out. Kakashi stared at her, at Rin, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. No jutsu flared, no chakra distortion, no telltale shimmer of illusion. She stood there, impossibly real, and it broke something in him. He stepped closer, eyes never leaving hers. "How is this possible?" he asked, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. Rin, no, the woman wearing her face, looked at him with such unbearable familiarity that his breath caught. "I never left you," she whispered. Not really. He should have struck, should have called it out for what it likely was, an impostor, a trick, a manipulation. But instead, his fingers reached out, grazing her arm. Warm, solid, real. Something inside him unraveled. He had spent years pretending her death didn't haunt him. Had told himself again and again that he had done what was necessary, what was right. But now, confronted with the very image of the girl he had failed, no genjutsu had ever cut this deep. His voice shook. "If you're Rin, then why now? Why come back?" Her expression faltered for the first time. "Because you needed me." The way she said it, the inflection, the timing, it was flawless. And yet it was too flawless. Kakashi's shinobi instincts whispered warnings, subtle and quiet, buried beneath the avalanche of emotion. He closed his eyes, just for a breath. When he opened them, she was still there, still looking at him the way Rin once had, like he was worth saving, and maybe, just maybe, he wanted to believe it. He didn't speak again, didn't press her further. For the first time in what felt like years, he let the silence linger, not as a shield, but as a question, one that he was afraid to ask, and even more afraid to answer. The imposter, or ghost, or miracle, stepped forward and laid her hand on his chest. "I'm here," she said again. Kakashi didn't stop her. Not yet. Not tonight. Chapter 23.5, Walking the Tightrope. The night air was crisp, but Kakashi barely noticed it. He hadn't moved from his spot since she left. Since Rin left. No, not Rin. That wasn't possible. That couldn't be her. And yet, he sat motionless at his window, arms folded, the unfinished cup of tea on the table long since gone cold. Konoha's quiet hum at this hour usually brought him peace, but not tonight. Tonight, his mind was a battlefield. The encounter had been brief, too brief for something that unraveled him so completely. Her voice, her mannerisms, her chakra signature, they shouldn't have matched, but they did. Almost perfectly, and that terrified him more than anything. Rin was gone. She had died in his arms. He had buried her himself. That was a truth carved into his soul like a kunai wound that never healed. So how was it that the woman who stood before him just hours ago had looked at him with those same soft eyes Rin once had spoken to him with that same warmth? "Not really," she had said. Those words echoed over and over in his mind. Kakashi exhaled, slow and controlled, trying to center himself. Logic told him it was genjutsu, an illusion, a manipulation. But even now, hours later, his heart hadn't caught up with his brain, and that was the most dangerous part of it. He was letting emotion cloud his judgment. "You're slipping," he told himself. "You're letting the ghost of the past become more real than the present." But deep down, he knew it wasn't just grief or longing clouding his senses. Something was wrong, something off. The woman wasn't just imitating Rin. She felt like Rin. That chakra, that grief buried beneath the smile, that slight tremble in her voice. No mere genjutsu could recreate that, and yet it had to be. Because if it wasn't, then everything he believed about the world, the finality of death, the permanence of loss, was unraveling before his eyes. Kakashi ran a hand over his face, sighing again. He had allowed himself to be vulnerable, had dropped his guard for a moment that he couldn't afford to. And now, a whisper of doubt crept into his focus, a thread of uncertainty winding its way through everything he thought he knew. This wasn't just about emotion, it was a tactical risk, and that made it his problem to solve. Kakashi didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, her face appeared again, Rin's face, or rather, the face that looked like hers. And each time, the unease crept further into his thoughts like roots breaking stone. He stood at the window, watching the last lanterns in the village flicker out one by one, as if Konoha itself were succumbing to sleep. But not him. His mind raced too fast, knotted around a single question. Who is she really? He retraced every moment of the encounter, her entrance, her tone, the way she avoided explaining anything substantial, the subtle emotional cues that didn't match the situation. He'd spent his career analyzing deception, and tonight something had stood out. No, everything had. The Rin he knew would have never come back this way. She wouldn't have been so calm, so orchestrated. And there was that other layer too, the way her chakra behaved. It wasn't like how it had been in the war. It was disciplined, masked as if trained for stealth, like an ambu, or worse, like root. Kakashi's jaw tightened. He had no proof yet, no name, no record, just a phantom wrapped in genjutsu and manipulation. She's dangerous, but to whom? He had to approach this carefully. If he reported this too early, he risked alerting her. If he waited too long, he could endanger himself, or worse, Naruto. There was also the troubling possibility that this wasn't a lone act, that someone else had orchestrated her involvement, someone with knowledge of his past, someone using his grief as leverage. And Kakashi didn't take kindly to being used. He walked across the room, opening a drawer beneath a false panel in the floor. Inside was a thin stack of files, classified dossiers, most sealed by the Hokage's authority. He withdrew one marked with red tape. Uzumaki clan survivors. Not much remained. Kushina, dead. A few scattered rumors from minor villages, whispers of red-haired orphans, but no confirmed sightings. And now this woman appearing suddenly, calling herself Lady Yuki, cloaked in mystery and genjutsu, claiming nothing, offering even less, but possessing chakra that didn't lie. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. If she was an Uzumaki, then she'd survived something she shouldn't have. And if she wasn't, then she had faked her heritage with surgical precision. Either way, she had targeted him, and she had known exactly who to become. Not Kushina, not any other famous kunoichi, but Rin, his weakness, his ghost. Kakashi closed the file slowly, the pages heavy in his hands. He would find the truth, without alarming the Hokage, and definitely without Danzo catching wind of it. He trusted neither system nor politics to handle something this delicate. He would investigate quietly, carefully, and when the truth came to light, whether it was a spy, a root asset, or something else entirely, he'd be ready, and next time, he wouldn't let emotion get in the way. Morning arrived with pale, overcast light, casting everything in a dull gray that perfectly matched Kakashi's mood. He had been up all night, combing through records, rechecking old field reports, searching for any pattern that might lead him to the woman in red. But there was nothing. No match in the active registry, no traceable alias. Even Lady Yuki's public appearances were maddeningly curated, each interaction brief, vague, laced with charm and redirection. She was, in every sense of the word, a ghost. And ghosts didn't just appear without help. Kakashi thought as he adjusted his flak vest and masked up for the day. Or she's damn good at shielding herself. He stepped out onto the street, passing civilians starting their day, most still sleepy-eyed and smiling. The village was at peace, but only on the surface. Beneath that, the shinobi knew something was shifting. The tension between the clans, the recent route reassignments, an air of scrutiny lingering in the Hokage Tower, and now this woman dancing at the edge of every quiet moment. He didn't want to think it was connected to the Uchiha situation. There was no evidence, but intuition told him otherwise. The timing was too precise, the performance too perfect. He paused near a tea stand, ordering a cup but hardly touching it. His mind was still back in that moment, her eyes meeting his, filled with the kind of sorrow no illusion could fake. It hadn't just been a ploy. There had been something real beneath it, and that terrified him more than the genjutsu itself. Because if she had truly felt pain when she looked at him, why? Was she someone from his past? A root operative designed to break him? An Uzumaki with her own buried grudge? Or someone with a connection to Rin that he'd missed entirely? His instincts screamed that this wasn't a game anymore. This was personal, but not just for him. The woman, whoever she was balancing something precarious. Her performance, her poise, even her timing, they reeked of someone walking a tightrope. Not an assassin, not a saboteur, someone with a mission that didn't involve bloodshed. Not yet. That was the thread that caught Kakashi's attention the most. She doesn't want to hurt anyone. She wants to protect something. But what? And more importantly, from who? He finished the tea and left the stand without a word. His morning route would be the same. Visit the academy, check on Naruto and the other students, stop by the Uchiha compound as part of his normal patrol. But today, his mind would be elsewhere, on the red-haired ghost with a geisha's smile in Rin's eyes. By evening, Kakashi stood atop a quiet rooftop overlooking the Uchiha district. The shadows stretched long and the streets below were silent, save for the distant thrum of conversation behind closed doors. From here, he could almost forget the shifting tensions. Almost. But tonight, his attention wasn't on the Uchiha. It was on her. He had tried to let it go, tried to focus on the patrol, on the academy reports, on his task of monitoring Sasuke's development. But her presence loomed behind every thought like a shadow stitched to his heels. He had nothing concrete, no name, no mission brief, no real intel. Everything about Lady Yuki existed in half-truths and suggestion. She claimed no allegiance, operated with precision, and most troublingly knew too much. About him, about Rin, about how to make him hesitate. Kakashi crouched low on the roof's edge, drawing a slow breath, then another. He was trained to compartmentalize, to put emotion in its place. But this wasn't emotion. This was instinct, gut deep and sharpened by years of survival. Something was wrong, and it had nothing to do with her being a threat to Konoha in the traditional sense. He wasn't even certain she wanted to harm anyone, not the village, not even him. But she's hiding something, something bigger than just identity. And the problem with secrets was that they never stayed buried. He tilted his head slightly as he sensed movement nearby. A flicker of chakra, controlled, distant. Not her, just another patrol crossing the rooftops. He let it pass, eyes still scanning the streets. Danzo had eyes everywhere. Kakashi knew better than to speak openly about what he'd seen, not to the Hokage, not even to the elders. If he made noise without evidence, someone like Danzo would take that as license to act. And if this woman, whoever she truly was, had any connection to the Uchiha situation, then exposing her recklessly could ignite more than just a scandal. It could cost lives. Kakashi clenched his jaw. He would not repeat his past mistakes. Not again. This time, he would uncover the truth before it broke everything apart. His next steps would be careful. No pressure, no warning, just observation. He'd learn her movements, her allies, her purpose. If she was being manipulated, he would find out by whom. If she was manipulating him, well, he stood and vanished into the wind. Either way, Kakashi Hatake wasn't playing her game anymore. He was going to end it. Chapter 23.7, The Girl Beneath the Mask. Sakura's Diary, Day 22127, Year 7. Sometimes I think I've forgotten what my real face looks like. Lady Yuki smiles with practiced grace, speaks in half-truths wrapped in honey, and commands a room with illusions so fragile they dissolve under scrutiny. Sakura Haruno trains with her friends, laughs too loudly at Naruto's jokes, and dreams of becoming strong enough to protect the people she loves. But somewhere in between them, between the kunoichi and the geisha, the girl and the ghost, I've misplaced the person I really am. And tonight, for the first time, I think that absence terrifies me. It was supposed to be simple. Project an illusion, manipulate a memory, distract Kakashi long enough to throw him off my trail. I didn't expect it to work so well. I didn't expect to see him fall apart in front of me. I didn't expect it to hurt. Not like this. She sat alone in the candlelight, knees drawn to her chest, still wrapped in the remnants of her illusion. The long red hair had been unbound hours ago, pooled like blood over her shoulders. Her ornate kimono lay in a heap on the floor, discarded beside the porcelain mask that bore the faint design of cherry blossoms. Her reflection in the mirror was bare, vulnerable, no genjutsu, no disguise, just a 12-year-old girl staring into the hollow places of herself. Sakura pressed her hand to her chest. It was still racing. Even now, the sound of Kakashi's voice echoed in her ears. Rin? Her stomach clenched. She hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant for him to believe it so fully. But the way he had looked at her, like someone drowning who thought he'd seen the surface, that haunted her more than anything. The plan was to throw him off balance. That's all. A projected memory of a dead girl, a harmless emotional misdirection. Not this spiral of guilt. I used her face, Sakura whispered aloud, and it worked. He believed it. He reached out, and she hadn't stopped him. Sakura's Diary, entry continued. There's no excuse for what I did. No justification I can hide behind. I used Rin's face to protect my secrets, and in doing so, I became something I never wanted to be. A manipulator. A liar. The kind of person Kakashi would kill for the safety of the village. And yet, as I stood in front of him, wearing the illusion, speaking in her voice, I saw something I never expected to see. Hope. Hope that maybe he hadn't failed her, that maybe she'd come back for him after all these years. How do you carry the weight of shattering something like that? How do you pretend you didn't see his hand tremble when he said her name? The silence of her room pressed down like water. The night air seeped through the window, cool against her fevered skin, but it didn't clear her head. It only made her feel more exposed. She tried to focus, tried to analyze her next move. Danzo couldn't find out. The Hokage couldn't suspect. Kakashi couldn't dig further. She should be mapping contingency plans, not crying into her knees. But her chakra was fraying. Her thoughts were tangled. Her heart ached. How had she let it get this far? How had she crossed so many lines? Sakura buried her face in her arms and breathed in the scent of sakura blossoms still clinging to her kimono. She hated it, hated what she was becoming. And for the first time since she'd been reborn into this world, she didn't feel like the girl with the answers. She just felt lost. Sakura's Diary, Day 2127, Year Temued. I think I crossed a line I can't uncross. I've lied before, hidden truths, crafted half-truths. But this was different. I weaponized a memory, a ghost. I turned someone's grief into a shield. Not because I had to, but because it was effective, because it worked. I used Kakashi's pain, and now I don't know how to look at myself. She stood in front of the mirror again, this time as Sakura. No kimonos, no rouge, no mask, just her cotton pajamas and disheveled pink hair, staring back at a girl who barely recognized herself. Her fingers curled tightly around the vanity edge, knuckles white. What would Rin say if she knew? Would she pity her? Hate her? Forgive her? Would she understand that this wasn't about cruelty, but survival? That it was about keeping a fragile balance intact? That if Kakashi found out who she really was, if he realized that Lady Yuki wasn't some mysterious Uzumaki geisha, but a time-displaced child who knew the future, everything would collapse? No, Rin wouldn't forgive her. She shouldn't, and neither should Kakashi. Sakura's diary, entry continued. Every move I make is to stop the Uchiha massacre, but lately I'm starting to wonder if the mission is just an excuse now, a justification for every manipulation, every cruel trick, every emotional weapon I've used. Is this who I've become? Am I still trying to save people, or am I just playing God with someone else's grief? She lit a single candle. The flame flickered like her resolve, faint, inconsistent. Across the room, her mask watched her silently from the shelf. Lady Yuki was strong, controlled, beautiful. She didn't shake. She didn't cry. She didn't care. Sakura envied her, because being Sakura meant feeling everything all the time. It meant remembering Rin's death in vivid detail, even when it wasn't her memory. It meant knowing what Kakashi had lost and exploiting it anyway. It meant guilt so sharp it carved into her like a kunai. She wanted to scream. She wanted to go back in time and stop herself. But most of all, she wanted Kakashi to never find out. Because if he did, if he looked at her the way he once looked at her illusion, if he ever realized it was her behind Rin's face, it would break whatever fragile thing they still had. And this time, she wouldn't be able to fix it. Sakura's diary, day 2128, year 7. I've spent so long pretending to be strong, pretending to be in control, but I think I've lost track of who I really am beneath all the masks. Lady Yuki, the dutiful daughter, the student, the liar. They're all me, and none of them are. The scent of jasmine lingered in her room, a leftover trace of the perfume she'd worn as Yuki. It clung to the fabric, to her hair, to her skin. No matter how many times she scrubbed, she couldn't get rid of it. It was in her pores now, just like the lie. She sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolls and notes scattered around her. Half-drawn seal formulas, surveillance updates, timelines of the Uchiha's growing unrest. Her real mission, her real purpose, was buried somewhere underneath it all. But tonight, she wasn't studying. She was spiraling. Every time she tried to focus on her long-term goals, preventing the massacre, protecting Sasuke, countering Danzo's maneuvering, her thoughts returned to him, to the way Kakashi had looked at her, not as Lady Yuki, not even as Rin, but as someone who could hurt him. And she had. The worst part? He didn't even know it yet. Sakura's diary, entry continued. I've replayed our last conversation over and over in my mind. Rin, it's been so long. He believed it. Not just because the jutsu was good, but because he wanted to. There's a loneliness in Kakashi that runs deeper than I ever realized. A quiet, unspoken ache. I touched it. I used it. And it scares me how easily I could do it again. Because it worked. Because he let his guard down. Because part of me, some sick, desperate part, wants to keep that connection alive, even if it's built on a lie. She buried her face in her hands, fingers tangled in her hair, shoulders trembling. She had told herself she could do this, that she could walk this line forever, that she could be cold, calculated, untouchable. But she wasn't. She was a 14-year-old girl who had seen too much, carried too much, and now was cracking under the weight of it all. The line between herself and the mask was thinning. What happens when it disappears completely? When she doesn't just wear Yuki or Rin, she becomes them? Would anyone even notice the difference? Would she? Sakura's diary, day 2129, year 7. I lied to protect a mission. I disguised myself to protect the timeline. I told myself that playing the role of Rin would keep Kakashi at bay, keep him from discovering who I am and what I know. But it wasn't just about that anymore. Not really. I needed to hurt less. And in the moment I saw his eyes soften, I felt seen, not as me, but as her. And that made the lie feel even crueler. Sakura didn't sleep that night. By morning, her eyes burned from tears she hadn't even noticed shedding. The pillow was damp beneath her cheek. Her hair, still streaked faintly with perfume, clung to her skin in messy strands. She rose slowly, her body aching with fatigue that had nothing to do with physical strain. Everything felt distant, like she was watching herself go through the motions from far away. She washed her face in silence, avoided the mirror. She couldn't face it. She couldn't face her. There were missions to prepare for, academy lessons to attend, smiles to fake, friends to protect, secrets to guard, lies to maintain. And she would do it all. But part of her, the part that remembered Kakashi's voice breaking when he whispered Ren's name, that part was fraying. Sakura's diary, entry continued. He'll figure it out eventually. I know it. And when he does, I'll lose him. Not as a comrade, not as a mentor, but as someone who looked at me, at the person he thought was Ren, with love, with pain, with vulnerability. He let me see him, and I used it. I wish I could take it back, but if I did, everything else might fall apart. And maybe that's the price I pay. For every future I'm trying to save, I lose a piece of myself. She walked out the door that morning with a steady step and a practiced smile. No one noticed the fracture lines beneath her eyes. No one saw the girl unraveling beneath the skin of a survivor. No one saw the mask tightening. And that, more than anything, told her she was still safe. For now. That's the end of it for now. I can't wait to show you what's next. Hope you enjoyed. Riow out.